There are 160 total overclocks in Deep Rock Galactic, and I'm playing a mission with each and every one to tell you what you can expect from them. This week is Engineer's turn to show off his signature Warthog and his iconic PGL. Let's start off with Cycle Overload. This gives a substantial fire rate boost along with a small damage increase in exchange for a longer reload and increased spread. This is great for fending off surprise attacks and bursting down particularly tough targets, and it's good for anyone who wants to hold down the trigger, or spam it I guess if you're more of a turret whip kind of person. The long reload makes the gun very cumbersome though, so you're going to need to make every shot count, which can be very difficult depending on the circumstances. You can potentially bypass most of the long reload with animation cancelling, but I don't like doing that intentionally at least. The increased spread puts this overclock firmly in the heavy close range self-defense department, but it's also great at taking care of Praetorians and oppressors if you can get close to them. Magnetic pellet alignment has sort of the opposite effect, a small pellet boost, a major accuracy boost, and a weak point damage boost in exchange for a slower fire rate. This is a good overclock for engineers who prefer to pick their shots. It's great for Mactera and Spitters and other medium range engagements, but the slower fire rate puts you at a disadvantage when you get mobbed by grunts. Similar to AI Stability Engine, you'll really need to be good at hitting weak points to make the most out of this overclock. You aren't as heavily penalized for not doing so, but you'll also gain less from doing it properly. Either way, if you've got a good team or a setup to cover you against mobs of grunts and other mass surprise attacks, it can be very good at picking off lone or priority targets. Pump action is the new clock on the block with a substantial increase to damage and pellet count and gives blow-through in exchange for a reduction in ammo, fire rate, and mag size. This is sort of the double barrel of the Warthog in nature. It's good burst damage with more uneven output. The damage boost is enough to basically ensure whatever's in front of you ends up dead, and the blow-through will make sure that whatever's behind that enemy is also dead. If you find your shots leaving grunts on the edge of death a lot, then this is a great overclock for you. If you're the kind of person to use one shot per grunt, then you'll probably not enjoy the ammo penalty, but it's still got some use for taking care of tougher targets, and the blow-through can make dealing with crowds significantly faster. Lightweight magazines is a simple, clean. More ammo, faster reload. It's nice for keeping your gun loaded at all times, but if you're the kind of person to run the ammo upgrade in Tier 2, you might not notice it much since it's only an extra 14 shells. Still, it will make a difference. Stunner is another clean that actually has some interesting effects. First, it gives the Warthog the ability to stun on body shots and not just weak point hits. It also gives you a 30% damage boost against stun targets. This is an appreciable boost, but keep in mind that the stun is still somewhat unreliable, and you may either kill the enemy or run out of ammo in the mag at around the same time you get the stun off, and the stun is short enough that it won't outlast the reload animation. I'd definitely keep taking the stun upgrade on your turrets in mind for this one, just to help alleviate that problem. Also remember that your power attack can also stun, sometimes. And finally, we have mini shells. This gives you a significant ammo boost and mag size increase, but reduces your damage and removes the ability to stun. This one's good for firing indiscriminately into small groups. If you're the kind of engineer who can't ever seem to land one-shot kills on grunts, this is a good overclock for you, but be warned, it may now sometimes take 3 instead of 2. The big ammo increase does make the other upgrades in Tier 2 much more attractive though, so if you want to use one of those but also really want more ammo, this could be a good overclock for you. Overall, the damage decrease is small, but it's still very noticeable. Now we move on to the PGL. I was using RJ250 for the Warthog testing, so we'll start there. Honestly, I don't want to make this a tier list series. This is one of the few times I'll say something like this, but RJ250 is S tier. Sure, the overclock is named after the rocket jump ability, but you'll get a 70% increase in ammo and a decrease in reload time, all in exchange for a modest damage penalty. Now, modest may be the wrong word for it, because it does mean you can't one-shot grunts with the direct explosion unless you take both damage upgrades, but taking the incendiary upgrade fixes that. It's still enough heat to ignite a grunt, and the grunts still burn all the way to death, most of the time at least. It just takes a few seconds. When you look at it like that, the rocket jump is almost a cherry on top. That being said, the jump is still immensely useful for escaping from enemies, taking shortcuts up a cliff, and reaching platforms without a scout's help. Clean Sweep is, appropriately enough, a clean overclock that gives a boost to AoE range and damage. At first glance, the PGL may deal enough damage to one-shot grunts, but remember that explosive weapons have fall-off. Clean Sweep gives you greater coverage of one-shotting over your AoE as well as a higher damage dealt overall. The extra radius is nice and also increases your one-shot coverage due to the way damage fall-off works, since the fall-off is linear from the maximum damage radius to the edge of the full explosion. While this can be fairly niche, it's worth noting that with both damage upgrades, clean sweep, and a high roll on homebrew explosive, the grenade will deal just barely enough damage to one-shot grunts across the entire radius. Without clean sweep, the highest rolls will fall just short on the edges of the explosion. Even without that niche interaction, clean sweep is a great overclock to make sure that the entire pack of grunts ends up dead instead of only most of them. Hyper Propellant is a bit of a different beast. It almost completely nullifies the explosion radius, reducing it by 70%, and gives you a massive direct damage bonus and enough projectile velocity to basically make it hit scan at anything other than extreme range. This turns your grenade launcher into a railgun at the expense of AoE. It can one-shot some tougher targets with little effort, but it does fall short of one-shotting a Praetorian, so keep that in mind. Even so, it's a big damage spike you can pull out on something that needs to be dead right now, but if you take this overclock, I would highly recommend you bring something to deal with crowds, because while a tiny AoE is still serviceable for cleaning up swarmers, larger packs of enemies will give you a lot of trouble. Luckily, Engineer has a great weapon-independent solution in the form of plasma bursters, although if you're careful and proactive, proximity mines will work as well. Compact rounds gives 5 more ammo in exchange for a bit less area damage and a smaller radius. This means you'll need 1 damage upgrade to one-shot grunts at the center of the explosion, but that's still an advantage over RJ250's 2. If you're running Incendiary, it won't matter as much though, but the grunts will burn to death faster, especially around the edges. RJ250 does give significantly more ammo though. The small decrease in explosion radius is noticeable, but not every pack of grunts is going to be large enough to feel the loss. You will want to be prepared to clean up the edges of the pack though. Pack Rat just gives you 2 more ammo. Yep, this compact rounds and RJ250 are all very similar in nature on a sort of sliding scale of trading damage for ammo with some other effects. The full math of how each overclock stacks up is too complicated to fit into this video, but suffice to say that if you're just aiming the one-shot grunts without Incendiary and you're taking the ammo upgrades where possible, they're all around the same level of ammo and damage, so it's generally not really core to their build. It's more about their tangential side effects, like the decreased range on compact rounds. But if you're taking Incendiary, all that goes out the window. Since 95% of the time, even with RJ250 and no damage upgrades, the grunts are going to burn to death anyway. Taking a break from all this damage for ammo stuff, we have Fat Boy. This is the exact opposite. You sacrifice all of your ammo for an immense amount of damage. You also gain a decent boost to explosion size, a radiation field that lingers for several seconds after the explosion, and lowered projectile velocity. This is great for annihilating large crowds, capable of one-shotting even slashers, but you'll need 1 damage upgrade to one-shot guards at the center of the explosion. The radiation field will keep that area covered for as long as it lasts, meaning it's great for locking down a direction of approach if you're a fan of that tactic. It'll also clean up any guards that manage to survive pretty well. The prohibitively low ammo count means you'll want to save it for the largest hordes though, meaning you'll want those plasma bursters or proximity mines or something else that can deal with medium-sized crowds well. And that's every overclock for the Warthog and PGL. It's safe to say that there's something in these weapons for almost everyone, whether you want single target burst or massive AoE.
Successfully retrieved. Make it snappy, team. The drop pod won't hang around forever.
That one grunt. That one grunt got it.